Kia ora tātou, huhi mai nei, mōrena. Good morning everybody and welcome to the Finance and Performance meeting for the 18th of March. I'd like to start with apologies, and we have apologies received from Councillor Coombe for absence on council business, Councillor Collins for early departure. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bartley and Henderson for absence. IMSB Chair David Taipri and Councillor Walker for lateness. And I've said Councillor Collins for early departure, but I think he's Skyping in. I saw him this morning. He wasn't feeling too good, so he's Skyping in from Albert Street. Any other apologies? I'll move those apologies. Councillor Stewart, do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. So therefore we move for attendance by electronic link, and we have so far Councillor Filipina, IMSB member Blair and Councillor Collins. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Young. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, Madam Chair. Renata Blair for Eden Park Trustee.
Yes, thank you, member Blair. Noted. Confirmation of minutes. I'd like to move that the minutes of the 18th of February, both open and confidential, be moved as a true and correct record. I have a seconder from Councillor Young. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. I've received no petitions, no public input, no local board input, and no advice for any extraordinary items. We then move straight into the agenda, and our first big item is the presentation from Eden Park Trust Board, noting that we haven't heard from them since September last year, so I'm sure they'll have a great update, and I'll welcome first John Bishop to the table to introduce the item. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. Look, firstly, just to introduce the Eden Park team. To my immediate left, Brett Winstanley, the CFO. Next is Nick Saltner, the Chief Executive, and lastly, Vicky Salmon, the Chair of the Finance Committee. So this is an opportunity for Eden Park to update councillors on the performance of Eden Park, and this stems from a resolution of this committee back in March 2019, where Eden Park has been invited on a 6-monthly basis to update the committee on the performance and financial projections of Eden Park. So this is one of the regular updates. It deals with the loan and development funding agreement, management and operational issues continue to be dealt with via Auckland Unlimited. Council finance staff have considered the presentation prior to this meeting, and we don't have any particular risks or issues to raise with this committee. With regard to the loan to Eden Park, given the COVID constraints, the covenant waiver has been extended through to 31 October 2021, and this extension was authorised by the then acting CFO under his delegation. I should point out that Eden Park are currently complying with the covenant, so they're not reliant on the waiver. Lastly, in conjunction with Eden Park, we continue to monitor their situation, and we receive regular updates from Brett and his team. So on that, I'll hand over to Eden Park.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. We've just got a short presentation. Brett's going to give us some of the numbers from our year end, and we can talk through that and the loan and how our grant funding is going. And Nick is going to kind of update us on how COVID has gone for us, some of the big events that have been happening and not happening, and the impact that has on us and how we've been working with the community. And lastly, we'll be giving you an update on how we're going with Auckland Unlimited. So I'll hand over to Brett to take us through some of the numbers. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you. Could I have the next slide, please?
Wait, click there.
Oh, just beg your pardon.
Right.
Click. Yeah. Okay. This slide summarises our financial performance in 2020, including our statutory accounts results. We've included the 2019 figures for a comparison, and the central column is 2020 figures adjusted to exclude the what you might call abnormal items, the council grants of 3.089 million and the government wage subsidies of 451,000. So they are included as revenue items in the statutory accounts, but to give a like-for-like comparison with the prior year, we've taken them out in the central column. So the central column gives us a realistic view of our performance in the COVID environment. We, of course, lost a number of key events to international test matches in June and August. Some one-off events such as the North-South match were scheduled for Eden Park, and the Super Rugby year and one international T20 match were disrupted. Notwithstanding that, we achieved a positive operating profit of $2.9 million on a like basis, and a profit before depreciation of $1.859 million. Of course, in the statutory accounts, including the benefit of the grants, we recorded a profit before depreciation of $5.4 million. Could I have the next slide, please? Oh, once again, sorry. Learning. This page summarises the grant funding. We have continued with the monthly applications for grants in accordance with the project summary submitted, submitted to council. The total of grant funding to date is $3.909 million out of the total of 9.8 over 3 years. We continue to work within the parameters of the schedule and the protocols in place for the application and approval of grants, and that will continue. A brief summary of the major projects: they include the replacement of the number 1 turf. That project is now complete, and the first event on the new turf took place last Sunday. So our final costs with respect to that project will be submitted before the end of this month. Other projects include the new Samsung screen and a number of other key infrastructure costs, including emergency lighting, upgrades to our venue operations control centre, improvements to our main file servers and firewalls, replacement of a failed boiler, and improvements to our internal what we call IPTV system, the internal software that runs screens throughout the park. With respect to the loan, we began with an opening balance of $46.5 million in September 2019 when the ASB loans were assigned to Auckland Council. The balance at our financial year end was $46 million. We've had fluctuations since then, as we do on the basis of our regular movements in cash flow. We peaked at the 31st of January at $47.25 million. End of February, it's down to $46 million, and the balance today outstanding is $45 million. I'll pass over to Nick Sortner, our CEO.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Morena Mayor Goff, Chair Desley Simpson, Ward Councillors and Māori Statutory Board that I know is not here this morning. Firstly, Mayor Goff, congratulations, America's Cup victory. I think it was a wonderful outcome for the city and again for the event industry. So yeah, thank you, and thank you to everyone who was involved in securing that event for Auckland. I touch on that on the basis that for us, some of the measures that we implemented throughout this challenging period included seconding our operations manager to the America's Cup. Keith Parker is well respected in the industry, and for the last 6 months he's been working with the team to deliver that event, and it's fair to say, a gentleman of 65, it's been one of his career highlights, and worked very closely with Auckland Unlimited, and he'll come back to the team with a new skill set and invigorated to deliver events for the city at Eden Park. Over the last 6 months, We've looked at a variety of initiatives to generate new revenue and innovate, given the disruption around COVID. Eden Park and the event industry is one of the few industries that really struggle to operate unless under level 1. We have looked with our hirers to implement various pods for fixtures at level 2, but the reality is for our business to operate, 53 pods of 100 with the requirement around staffing, toilets, cleaning, etc., it makes it very, very difficult. So it was welcome news for us last week, moving back to level 1, and it's fair to say even last week's fixture, the crowd was probably compromised to the tune of 10,000 with the late notification, but this weekend is looking very encouraging. As far as I mentioned some initiatives, you would have all read about our sale of the turf. We sold over 4,000 square metres to fans. For the last 17 years, the field have been in situ, undefeated for the All Blacks, and we hope that the new field will continue. Our new field was blessed last week, and our first fixture saw the Blues win convincingly, so hopefully that's a sign of what's to come. In relation to our other and additional content, you'd be aware that we secured our resource consent to host concerts. In the last 24 hours, our pre-sale for Spark sold out. Their website crashed last night with over 10,000 tickets already sold in that pre-sale. So looking extremely encouraging for the long weekend of the 24th of April. And there's the potential, obviously, for inbound tourism from within the country, given the popularity of 660. We're working with Watercare to reinstate the historic bores that are located at Eden Park. This is a wonderful initiative and in line with our commitment to working with the community, working with business to limit our impact on the environment. Irrespective of water levels and water restrictions in Auckland, we'll continue to be able to play elite sport at the park, all irrigation moving forward, and that's approximately 4 weeks away from implementation. We'll be both on the number 1 and number 2 using bore water, so no city water, but then also that bore will help facilitate some of the washdown requirements at the park. So a wonderful initiative, and the first venue in New Zealand to be able to do that, and thanks to the partnership with Watercare. The Cookie Project, as you'd all be aware, Eden Park is an underutilised asset. We work with now the Cookie Project. If you haven't had the chance to come down to the park and experience the Cookie Project's approximately 16 young men and women with mental and physical disabilities. They're located at the park, and they cook cookies and sell them to a variety of businesses. Yesterday, Sky City signed up for 40,000 cookies a year through the Cookie Project, and it's giving meaningful employment to them. That kitchen previously would have been used on 2 occasions a year. So that idle capacity, we're looking to see how we can use that space, whether it be for dark kitchens, for alternate purposes, and see greater utilisation. As far as our major events, we had 2 international fixtures, obviously a Bledisloe Cup and a sellout, the Mitre 10 Cup. We've also had our cricket content. You'd be aware that the close to sellout Australian fixture 2 weeks ago on the Friday was unfortunately cancelled or moved to Wellington as a result of restrictions in Auckland. These events have a material impact on our bottom line. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars per event, direct revenue and indirect revenue of, it's hard to quantify, whether it be through our members, corporate suites, etc. I will say that the encouraging sign is that COVID has shown, I think, the world that people love the escapism of sport and entertainment. We saw it last year with Super Rugby Aotearoa and the demand to come back to the park and engage with whether it be the community or whānau. And so I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing in terms of attendances and the desire to attend live sport, but it has been particularly challenging. North v South fixture, again, it was a sellout event for us. Our team worked tirelessly on making sure that that was a sellout, along with the Crusaders fixture. Unfortunately, that Crusaders fixture now has on 2 occasions been cancelled, so this weekend, touch wood, it will be the rematch that we thought of the final from last year. Just flicking over. Brett has already touched on the development funding agreement. I wanted to just mention that in collaboration with HG Turf, we've developed a HG Hero Eden Park edition, and that product now we're looking to export, whether it be locally or internationally. It's a technology that the park has developed in consultation with HG Turf. The implementation of that field was a huge success, irrespective of some of the challenges we face with our Karaka Turf Farm with the first lockdown and the delays that caused, and then obviously throughout the last 12 months of planning. That was 3 years in the planning, and again, thank you to Mayor Goff from correspondence, I think dating back approximately 3 years ago, our conversations, and we are now in a wonderful position to be able to host the 3 Women's World Cups over the next 3 years with a safe and stable surface. With regard to the Samsung Super Screen, it's fair to say it's been a game changer for us, for the fan experience. I think everyone that's come to the park has seen what a wonderful addition that's been, and what it can offer to the fans and to our hirers moving forward. This is something that is mandatory for the FIFA Women's World Cup. As some of you may be aware, FIFA has delayed the city announcement and the venue announcement for approximately a further 3 to 6 months until they can come out and observe our venues and compare them against the Australian venues that have been put forward. And I think when they come out and see that screen, they'll be blown away with what it can do and the requirement that's needed for the opening fixture should Auckland be able to secure that. Brett talked about the facilities and the operational upgrades, obviously critical to ensure the safety and security of our patrons. We're now projecting over the next 12 months that we'll have upwards of 600,000 fans coming through the park, and the economic benefit for the local community has already been seen with some of the response we've had around our recent announcement for 660. With regard to community engagement, we continue to work with our local schools, 12 local schools, around utilisation of the park. I think I've joked at this forum before that I'm close to now 5 years in New Zealand. My 2 daughters have been born in New Zealand, and hopefully my citizenship ceremony will be the 3rd at Eden Park, and I'll be able to get my New Zealand citizenship at my workplace. As far as community engagement, we're a finalist in the Westpac Business Awards, and again, it's a reflection on the work we've undertaken with the community, and we realise the importance of our community given our location and our utilisation. Touched on the cookie project. Eid has been an event that we've now hosted for a number of years and will continue to do so. The Morningside Urban Market Garden, again, for those councillors that may not have experienced it, we have 12 refugees that grow fruit and vegetables, flowers, edible flowers at the park, and then they're sold to businesses in the local area, providing meaningful employment for those young men and women. We've got a dog walking group that over 100 members now participate in that program. We have our Eden Park Christmas that I think is going to go from strength to strength. The city mission, we changed the format this year with COVID. I know, again, council employees and councillors gave a significant donation for that event, but it really now has become embedded in our DNA, and that's an event that will every year be held at the park, certainly during my leadership. The Sky Christmas markets, we had the opportunity to engage with local businesses to have over 60 of them represented on the field of play for a unique experience, and it was something that I think was born out of, again, our innovation and need to diversify revenue streams, but now will come as stable on our calendar of events. Our hood initiatives, we've got still, it's in excess of now 1,400 members of the hood. Fair to say that there are a number of them already requesting tickets for 660, but we've all of a sudden got this huge demand, but we are looking to give them priority access for that event. Well, otherwise they'll be able to sit in their backyard and listen. Auckland Unlimited, I must say that it's been a pleasure dealing with Nick Hill. It's been refreshing to see his approach to the park and some of the work that we've started with Nick is really encouraging. Our chair and Auckland Unlimited's chair, Mark Franklin, have had a number of meetings. I've met with Mark, and Nick and I have regular meetings. We were together yesterday, and I'm very confident that there's some synergies that will be achieved through that collaboration between the RFA and Auckland, or AT. Nick attended our strategic day, so our strategy day, approximately a month ago. He was encouraged by the conversation, whether it be with the independent trustees, along with our code representation, and those conversations continue, and I'm looking forward to working with Steve Armitage on how we can progress those over the coming months and years. That collaboration will need to work on the postponement, obviously, of the Rugby World Cup. That'll move now forward into 2022, and we're looking like a bumper 2022 with Te Matatini in February, the Women's Cricket World Cup in March, and then obviously yet to be confirmed the Rugby World Cup dates, but looking likely to be sort of the third or the fourth quarter in 2022, with Eden Park and Auckland hosting the opening fixtures and the final, and I'm very confident we can sell out the final with Black Ferns. I've mentioned already the FIFA Women's World Cup, so I don't think I need to touch on that any further. The last slide just talks about our engagement with the America's Cup and a couple of the team involved, but also we've got a small video just showing that post-event now with our new screen, we've got this video playing for all patrons. It was filmed in the hood, and each of these residents put their hand up, said we want to be part of the story, to say at the end of an event, be respectful. We are part of the community, and we want to embed Eden Park for many years to come. So I'm not sure, I'm assuming. There you go. I'm not sure if that's me or... No, there we go. Thank you.
Please respect our neighbourhood and get home safely.
As you can see, this place is our backyard.
And we wouldn't want it any other way.
Talofa lava to the more than 3,000 event staff that bring our national stand together. What's up, guys?
It's exciting hearing the cheering from my bedroom.
Yeah, it's a really nice community, and you can visit Kingston or Dominion Road with heaps of restaurants, and it's only a short walk away.
Don't forget to be a tiny Kiwi!
Get home free with public transport. Jump on the train or the AT Metro bus, including the NX1 from Kingsland, or you can catch a taxi from Dominion Road or from Kingsland. You can use the AT mobile app to help plan your journey.
We can't wait to welcome you back to Eden Park. Pop in soon.
Now, before I take any questions, there was one other point. I touched on our initiatives around sustainability and also the climate change emergency that has been declared by Council. We are working around the New Zealand target to reach net carbon zero for 2050, looking at ways in which we can utilise Eden Park for alternate purposes, what ways that we can deliver energy efficiency initiatives. So I just wanted to flag that that's something that we're working on, and in future presentations I'd like to table that just to give it an understanding of some of, I suppose, the benefits of the utilisation of Eden Park. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll open now for questions, and my first question I have is from Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And I have two questions, one for the board and one for our staff. So are you able to disclose how much revenue you raised from selling the replacement screen? You know, you replaced the big screen with existing screen with the new screen, And
No.
also how much you got from your turf fundraising?
So just to clarify, we didn't sell our existing screens. They're still in situ. So no, we didn't sell our old screens. They're still being utilised until end of life. And in relation to the turf replacement, we're in the vicinity of around $100,000.
My other question is, back at our September meeting, we had a change in the schedule of what the grant was to be used for, but it wasn't brought back to this committee, and I asked for an answer why that happened, and I haven't had it yet, Madam Chair.
John?
Yes, through you, Chair. So I understand that was looked at by the then Chief Executive, and under his delegation there were certain changes to what the grant money was spent on, but that review has been completed, I understand.
Yeah, Councillor, my understanding is the review has been completed. It was found to have no fault or error around the processing around that. Is that what you meant?
That's fine, but I just wondered going forward, if that happens, could we at least just have a memo so we know it's happened?
Yeah, I get that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Right, second question, Councillor Casey.
Thanks. There's the 2 questions. Nick, you went a bit fast on the 660. How many tickets are actually available for the 660 concert?
At this stage, 50,000.
And how many did you say have been pre-sold?
They exhausted Sparks on sale. Within 3 hours, they sold 10,000 tickets. So it's a pre-sale, so it exceeded expectations.
And in your application for the temporary noise barrier, you said there were to be 2 concerts on the Anzac weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Is that 1 concert and a rain day, or is it 2 concerts?
So just to clarify, subject to demand, there's the opportunity to host a second concert.
And just following Linda's question, my second question related to the video screen, can you just remind me the cost of it?
The total amount of grant funding was $2.3 million.
The cost of the screen, sorry?
The total amount of grant funding was 2.3. Is that what you're asking? That's the
I'm asking the
componentary part?
cost of the screen. Is that what you're saying? It cost 2.3 million?
That's the grant funding for the screen, yes.
Is that
That's
the
the amount
total
we've
cost
applied
of the screen? My question is, how much did the screen cost?
2.3.
And following Councillor Cooper's question, what are you doing with the current West Stand screen?
So there's 2 screens. There's one at the east end, one is the west. And for those of you, excuse me, who've attended events, they still get utilised until end of life.
Which is?
Well, the cycle is generally 10 years.
You finished, Councillor? Great, thank you. Next question, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, and congratulations for getting through the COVID period as well as you have. I think stadiums must be one of the more vulnerable entities in the world. And just on that theme, what there's kind of an old saying that stadiums only as good as the teams that play there, and I think particularly of the Blues, what a difference to the income does a good Blues season have? And I know you probably have to go back a few years to maybe bring that up, but as one of the main, in all seriousness, as one of the main codes here, what difference does it make if the Blues have a bumper year to the income?
So, well, I was living in Melbourne and playing AFL football at the time they were successful, so it's hard for me to comment on their success, but all I would say is that we saw last year the hype around the Blues. This weekend, I know there's over 20,000 tickets sold already for the fixture. It's material for us, whether it be through food and beverage revenue, through our member revenue, our corporate suites and general admission, but it's also the impact on the community. That those patrons, we're having Sunday afternoon fixtures, so whether it be lunch prior or dinner post, it has a material impact on those businesses too. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of benefit by having a crowd. In some instances, we're as low as 6,000 to last year we're up to 43,000 for a fixture.
Follow up, Nick, and it goes to your question your comment rather, I should say, about people wanting to watch sport, and that's kind of been one of the things that have become very clear during COVID. One of the other things that's often commented on is the effect on of sort of pay TV on engendering kind of interest in sport and therefore attendance at big matches. So New Zealand cricket team's been very successful over the last few years. This last little while they've been on Spark, and that has affected the ability of people to access, or the willingness of and the ability to access. Do you find is there any evidence or any examples that you've had with Eden Park where that sort of access actually that's limited sort of dampens down that interest and then consequential attendance? I mean, I think for myself, I could tell you all about the Indian cricket team, Washington Sundar, and all the players there, but you switch off when you don't get to see it. Do you find that in Eden Park?
I definitely think that free-to-air sport has an implication on interest and attendance. So in Australia, most sport is free-to-air, and as a result, people are then encouraged to then go and experience live sport because they're not paying for that service. We see it in this country that people are making a decision to either pay for a streaming service, Spark Sport, $25 a month, or go and experience it live. So it does have an implication. And for us, it's a matter of ensuring that the fan experience with new technology like our new Samsung Superscreen is compelling, so it gets people off the couch and to the venue. What I would say is that, just on your point about the impact for Stadio, I was keynote speaker at a conference in London on Monday night. Over 500,000 jobs have been lost in London and across the UK as a result of COVID in the event and stadium sector. So for us to be able to demonstrate what is possible and the reopening and the strategies that we implemented to ensure that you could get patrons safely into our facility and give that confidence to the global industry that we will be okay, it's just going to take some time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick and team, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is a pretty simple one, Nick. It's to do with your relationship with Auckland Unlimited. You spoke briefly about it. You now have a consent for 6 concerts annually. I just want to make sure that it's not going to be a zero-sum game, that you have a relationship that's strong enough that you can both win from this.
I think that's definitely the case. I was with Live Nation yesterday, and we've been having conversations at chief executive level. Live Nation has made comments publicly that historically they'll do 22 stadium shows in a 12-month period. They're looking in 2022 to have 45. Now, whether all of those come to Auckland, New Zealand is going to be questionable, but we've got a number of pencil bookings already for next year. There is obviously that pent-up demand, and with 6 concerts, we can't accommodate all of that demand that will come through, and particularly if artists are doing multiple shows.
Thank you.
Sorry. The point that we've emphasised with Nick Hill is about venue of best fit. What content is best suited for what venue?
Good clarification. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
So I'd just like to say first, I've been particularly impressed with the way Eden Park responded as a consequence of COVID. And I think that there's a lot that we can actually learn from that in respect of how our stadiums are run. They're the stadiums under Auckland Unlimited. And in that respect, it strikes me across a number of things that you do, and that goes to accessibility, goes to community engagement, goes to your ability to be able to pivot through COVID around management and so on, also your marketing, across virtually everything. It would be very helpful to have some templating that goes to benchmarking so that we can make some comparisons with how not just other venues that we control operate, but other venues that might go to consideration under a stadium strategy or the like. That would far more enable us to compare apples with apples or apples with oranges or just whatever the circumstances, so that hopefully overall across Auckland we're able to lift the game. In that respect too, I heard the discussion around the screen, for example, are making the assumption that that screen lifts revenue for Eden Park because it offers a better offering for the people that you're engaging with, irrespective of whether it's corporate sponsorship or crowd engagement and the like. It would be useful for us to have some information around that, because that also might help us to lift the game in respect of how our venues are run. So again, thank you very much. I think you also lift the game of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure there was a question in there somewhere. Councillor Hills.
Sure. Be answered, Madam Chair.
So we're comfortable in working on benchmarking. There's no problem whatsoever in that regard.
It's important, Wayne, I think very important.
And in terms of screen revenue, it certainly has assisted, whether it be with the fan experience or with partners like Samsung and embedding them for the next 5 years with the park.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that we wouldn't be able to attract some of these major sporting events if we didn't have that screen and just do, especially for FIFA, we just wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, that was the point, I think, around the funding in the first place. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora, Nick and team, and good to see things are going well, especially a lot better than the horrible year you've just had. So myself and Councillor Watson are the Councillor Liaisons for Auckland Unlimited, so we had heard the positive discussions and work with Nick Hill and team, so we're really keen for that to continue. I guess, what do you see as the benefits or potential conversations for Auckland? I get, my view has always been that the closer you can be with Auckland Unlimited and their kind of events and things that are going on, the better for Auckland. So it's just great to hear that. But I guess if you've got anything else to add, what that could bring over the next couple of years.
Thanks for the question. Eden Park proposed approximately 13 initiatives between the RFA and Eden Park. Then obviously the CCO review was implemented, and those have been dormant. Again, we've raised that with Nick Hill as an opportunity. There's certainly synergies and joint management models that could be implemented in relation to infrastructure, the sharing of infrastructure. We're seeing that in Venues New South Wales, where that's exactly what's occurred. They've all come under one umbrella organisation. And as I mentioned to Councillor Cashmore, that first and foremost, it's around venue of best fit. Whereas what content should be directed to what venue and to maximise the return for the city. So I could go through those 13. I don't think we need to today. And I know I saw your tweet about Phil Collins a couple of years ago, so I'm hoping to see you at 6:60 on the 24th of April.
Thank you. Mayor Goff.
Don't go too far into my tweets back then.
A couple of quick comments and a question. Firstly, congratulations on the community engagement, Nick. I attended the funeral of Constable Matt Hunt there, and it was great that we could use that facility to pay tribute to somebody who lost their life in line of duty. And I'm there every year as we deliver the presents for Auckland City Mission. And, I think particularly with the council input of funding, it's really good to see a community benefit that comes out of Eden Park collectively from yourselves and ourselves. The second comment is really just to emphasise the importance of what the Deputy Mayor has said, the need to work collaboratively between Auckland Unlimited and Eden Park. And with the Minister's announcement to me that he would be passing over to us the power of appointing directors to the Trust, I think we can work together, so it's not simply a race to the bottom in a zero-sum game, but how we can best serve the needs of the city and meet the revenue needs of the city. My question is this one, and it's going to be an estimate. If you run 6 concerts a year, what would be your anticipated income from hosting those concerts? Because obviously one of the reasons that I support the holding of concerts there is that our goal is to help you be more self-sufficient and less reliant on any grant from council. So that's what's behind my question.
Thanks for the question and thanks for your comments. Just in relation, obviously there's commercial sensitivities around each of the events, and it differs from 660 through to Barbara Streisand. What I would say is that our corporate suite interest has been enormous since we've announced concerts, and the annual price or licence for the suites have gone up approximately 25,000 almost overnight. So that's material to our bottom line. Then you look at it in terms of member retention or member growth. We now are in a position where, all going to plan, we'd be able to host 31 premium events, whether it be the Blues, whether it be 6 concerts, cricket content, Super Rugby, etc. And that's the ultimate, whether it be member or corporate experience now, where every second weekend there's a premium offering at the park. That then provides continuity of staff, whether it be our casual workforce. So to answer your question, it is difficult to say. I would envisage that direct and indirect revenues from concerts could be in the vicinity of 500,000 to 800,000 per event. But we need to now quantify that. We need to work with our promoters. As I say, that's an estimate. I don't want our promoters to be in a situation where they think we're gouging them or they can get a better deal, but I'm very confident that it's one of the things that I've been focused on since my time in New Zealand. The race to the bottom is a real issue in this market. I do think now Eden Park, and even talking with a promoter yesterday, Nick Hill, they're salivating at the opportunity to now sell up to 10,000 corporate meals or offerings at Eden Park that aren't available at other facilities in Auckland, and that has a material impact on their bottom line, but also ours.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. On the basis of the figures, and appreciate the commercial sensitivity and the fact that it's very much an estimate, but that could well lead you on a track back to self-sufficiency at Eden Park in terms of earning enough income to meet all of your operating and depreciation costs.
It could, but it's going to be a challenge. We've seen the draft annual plan for us, so the asset management plan over the next 10 years, and what I would say is that the event industry is not out of the woods in terms of COVID. We've seen it over in the last 2 months, and our members have been fantastic, but we've only had 70% renewal because of the uncertainty. So there is still a lot of uncertainty. Historically, recessions have seen more people want to go to music content, so there is going to be swings and roundabouts, but ultimately for us, we need major events to drive then our revenues to then be able to reinvest in the community.
Did I hear you say you might be bringing Barbara Streisand, or was that just the name that you...
This isn't being recorded, is it?
Moving on, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next question from Councillor Newman.
Yeah, my eyes sort of popped up when I heard that as well. Not that I'm necessarily a fan, but I'm a fan of you. Okay. I think
you also have the opportunity a few years ago about the Spice Girls, so...
Madam Chair, I think I got the call. To the team, look, thank you. I'm really conflicted about the Blues doing well because Councillor Dalton and I represent Chiefs country in our awards. So, but I accept that the Blues doing well is good for Auckland. So I can see that there is a really good product offering for the fans of the Blues at Eden Park, particularly when they're winning. And I suppose reflecting on what the Mayor has asked you, I mean, the Mayor was right to ask you that question. I can understand you responding the way you did, so I'm going to try and come at it at a slightly different angle. Hopefully you can address it. I think the summary of your financial performance for this year it's pretty good considering the environment that you're operating in. And if you could successfully roll out your product offering with the concerts and with the premium events, it seems to me that your forecast EBITDA results would probably lend to giving you the headroom over time, not only to meet your operating costs, but also to start to meet your deferred CapEx costs. But Nick, you sort of responded that it's challenging given what you're looking at and the time that it's and the scale of the funding required. So I just wanted you to expand a bit more on that, if you wouldn't mind, the sense to which you can get the headroom, and how quickly can you get the headroom to address some of those deferred CapEx costs that will be coming up? The council can't address our CapEx costs with our products, but it seems to me that you may be able to hit that with respect to yours if you can achieve the commercial returns that you're anticipating.
Well, there's a couple of elements to respond. In my 13 years at Etihad Stadium in Melbourne, we averaged 2.5 concerts a year. So there's no guarantee that 6 tours will come every year. What I would say is that there is expectations around the FIFA Women's World Cup regarding gender-appropriate bathrooms, lighting upgrades, etc., that are mandatory in order to be able to host those events. So there needs to be some sort of surety around funding to be able to deliver those events. And the forward planning. So there's a 10-year asset management plan of around 64 million required to just maintain Eden Park as it is. As we know, the world's changing dramatically. The cost of screens have come down significantly over time, but in other areas they've increased. There'll be issues with, I've said previously that in other stadia, you might, I gave a stat this morning that an AFL team in one weekend at the MCG would see a greater attendance than the Blues have seen in a season for the last 5 years. So the utilisation of a seat, as basic as a seat at a stadium, there's far greater. There's 2 million people using a seat at the MCG versus Eden Park, where we see 300,000 people a year going through. So as we increase the utilisation of the park, there'll be increased costs around seat replacement or door replacement, etc. So there is some work that needs to be done in that space. I can't give a definitive answer today. We are going to work with Auckland Unlimited, and we can, at future forums, give updates in that regard.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby, question.
Chair. So, and welcome, Nick. And others. So just on those screens, so you're seeing there's a bit of life in those old screens that you're going to utilise for a while.
I think every event they've failed since COVID. So we try and maintain them just from a perspective of ensuring that both ends of the venue has line of sight to the screens. But yeah, it's very much a balancing and juggling act. I wouldn't be suggesting that they're going to be there in 12 months or 2 years.
Right, because I mean, it was presented to us as the need to replace those screens. They weren't. The new screen wasn't an additional screen; it was a replacement screen. I guess, I think the line of questioning from my colleague Councillor Cooper was, or is there value in those screens? Has that value been realised? Because your statement earlier last year, I think it was that they had reached their end of life, and then you went on to say having the ability to replace the failed screens, etc.
So just want to emphasise, we're getting second-hand parts from overseas, etc. If you go to the western end, I encourage you, I can take you later today if you've got time, there are panels missing in the western screen. So if you look at the base, if you were to look up, there are panels missing at the base that have failed, and we can't get those pieces. They're no longer manufactured. They're Panasonic have moved on. In the viaduct, we had a conversation about second-hand screens with Panasonic. They're a different panel size now, so just can't emphasise enough. This is something that is required for the FIFA Women's World Cup. If Auckland secures the FIFA Women's World Cup, 1.3 billion people will watch Eden Park and Auckland for the first fixture. That is almost twice the attendance, the viewing attendance of the Rugby World Cup final from Eden Park. So from my side, it's been an amazing partnership with Samsung and the council, and I haven't had a person, if anyone has been to the park since it's been installed, and if you haven't, I'd encourage you to do so. I think it's some of the best value as a ratepayer that has gone into an asset for Auckland. So that's my personal view.
Okay, and so the intention is just to keep patching them up, keep using them for as long as you can, and then the additional screen is the security. That's your security. Okay.
We can't hold Bledisloe Cups, we can't hold major events without a screen. That's just the reality. You can't do a TMO decision without a screen.
A working screen.
Sorry, to clarify, a working screen.
Right, thank you. With no further questions, I'll go to comments. And the first comment from Councillor Mulholland. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment. To Nick and the team, Nick, you've got a great leadership style from my observation of meeting you and watching online through social media. I know you're a team player, so thank you to you and all of your staff and the team that have been involved in this presentation. Also, thanks to our staff for your work on this. Nice to have the opportunity to comment. I've listened to the questions, and so I had no questions to add, but I do want to acknowledge you've talked about the venue of best fit, so that is a really good strategic approach, and I absolutely applaud that. So thank you for considering that. Also, congratulations, of course, on the RC for up to 6 concerts PA. So that's also great. And one of the things that you also have talked about was with regards to the global industry, and we are all faced with so many challenges. So I congratulate you and the team again for working through that whole process. I previously had never, well, I think I'd only ever been once with BNZ to the stadium, and I now am a significant and huge supporter because I've seen the great work, and I acknowledge also what His Worship the Mayor has talked about, because it's something I had in my notes here about the various community-based activities and action plan and strategy that you have to contribute back to the community. That shows true leadership. So I also want to acknowledge that whilst we're here. So mine is a big thank you and congratulations to you and the team. And I'm really impressed with your leadership style with your executive team. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. It's nice. Councillor Watson.
No, I've just got a couple of quick words to make, and it's really nothing to do with the sport or the various figures and capital projects and everything that's getting chucked around. I just really want to commend you on that cookie project initiative. Out of all the presentation today, the thing that resonated most with me was the work that's being done there, and I know that you're doing that in a number of areas, and I'd just like to say how important that is to the people that are the recipients. So as much as, you know, the stadiums cater for our elite athletes and you know, the people that can afford to go along and watch, what really impresses me about Eden Park is the manner in which you're reaching out to those in our community, some of whom are less fortunate, and that's really that sense of Eden Park as a centre for all Aucklanders. So you don't need any encouragement from me, but I just thought it was important to make that point. Out of everything I heard today, that was the one thing that I'll be taking away. So thank you for those initiatives, and please keep doing them.
Thanks, Councillor Watson, and we are about to announce another initiative in that space, and once we do, I'd encourage Auckland Council to consider going down that path too.
Oh, now you've pricked up our ears. Councillor Walker.
Sure, just commendations again, and just want to really emphasise the increasing need for the council to have an effective strategy around this test, around what is best for Auckland. And I think Eden Park is incredibly well placed to develop that, so that we don't have acrimony and issues around investing in Eden Park or, frankly, any other venue, when we've got really objective, transparent and obvious information that anybody can look at and see that, yes, this is a really good investment, and that could be on the part of Auckland Unlimited, it could be on the part of anything. So I think you can play a very strong lead role in that exercise, and I would commend you to do so.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I'd like to move, do I have a seconder? Councillor Watson, thank you. Before we take this to the vote, I just wanted to make a brief comment. So, John, thank you. But to the Eden Park team, Nick, Brett and Vicky, thank you for the update of the performance and the financial update. I just want to leave you with a little personal anecdote, and that is my son took his eldest child to Eden Park last week, who's 5, and you've got a fan for life. And I just think that quite often it's taking the little ones first and they love it, and they want to go back, and they want to go back, and they want to go back. So I just want to put that from my own personal perspective. And I also, with other councillors, join you and thank you not just for what you're doing from a stadium perspective for sport, but your wider community outreach, because you're really proving that you can take an asset and make it work for everyone. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much. Fans on the field post-game this weekend, so I encourage them to come back.
Right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to thank the representatives of Eden Park for their attendance and the information provided. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you, Eden Park. Right, we move on now to item 9, and it's the Auckland Council Group quarterly performance to the 31st of December. It's a little bit academic, although we will go through this because, of course, the next item gives you a more recent update, but it is something that has to happen by way of regular reporting from a quarterly perspective. So I'll now ask Nicola and Ross to present the second quarter results. And John. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll lead off with what the group picture looked like for the 6 months to 31 December 2020. It is, as the Chair said, old news. It's not about a date. You'll hear the update about more recent performance a little bit later. This is the material that is covered in the half-year report that's already been released. So this information is generally out there publicly, but this is our regular quarterly performance reporting pack and report that's on the agenda for you. So just moving through the slides, if we go to just go to the overall snapshot for the group. So CapEx delivery was strong. So it was $1.2 billion of CapEx delivered for the 6 months for the group, which was very similar to the same period a year earlier, which was pre-COVID. So despite the impact of COVID, the council group's been able to maintain strong capital delivery. A little bit less than budget, but 93% delivered overall across the group. So quite a strong overall performance. In terms of operating performance, so it is quite a favourable picture that the numbers show for that 6-month period. So compared to the budget that we set, so compared to the emergency budget, which had $450 million less revenue than had been the case pre-COVID, compared to that sort of pessimistic budget of what we thought it would be, it's been slightly more favourable than that, so $100 million more favourable over that 6-month period. So strong results, particularly in terms of regulatory consenting and the infrastructure growth charges. So again, it's it's consenting and development activity that's really held up quite strongly, as well as rent in some places, rental income. At the same time, expenditure has been favourable to budget, $90 million favourable to budget for that period. So that's control of costs. A bit of some costs have been delayed as some spending hasn't occurred. Some of the things, provisions for cleaning, etc., for COVID weren't as not as much was required as we might have thought when we set the budget. So overall, a good, strong result for that 6-month period. In terms of debt, did you want to talk to the debt side, John?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So on the debt situation, given the strong or relatively strong financial performance compared to budget, net debt is lower than we'd previously forecast. And we look at debt to revenue, with the emergency budget, we did expect it to peak around 290%. We now expect that peak to be lower, around 285%. Credit ratings remain strong, AA and AA2 on a stable outlook, and we're not expecting those to change.
Thanks, John. So moving on to the group FTE picture. So overall, FTEs over that 6-month period decreased by 167 FTEs. So the majority of that was Auckland Council. That'll be covered part of the parent bit. And so you've seen we've got some increases there in water care and Auckland Transport, both in frontline service delivery areas. Some of that's in areas with revenue attached. And within with Auckland Unlimited, some drops there. So that's less activity occurring, less events being delivered, so less staff being required. So that's picture overall, 167. The others, the CCOs kind of balance out, and it's largely the reduction in Auckland Council FTEs, which is, has been planned and signalled previously. So that's the FTE picture. And moving on to the Auckland Council performance, I'll hand over to Nicola.
Thank you, Ross. So starting with capital performance, our capital expenditure's been at 80% of the budget, so we've delivered some good projects in the first 6 months, but our program is going a bit more slowly than what we thought. Part of the reason for that is obviously the budget was set later this year in July, and there's a process following that to agree work programs with local boards. So that has slowed down the commencement of the program. We are also seeing some pandemic-related challenges. So as lockdowns hit, also quite a tight labour market and some supply chain disruption, actually getting some parts and things into the country. So those things are affecting capital performance a bit, but we have delivered some great projects despite those challenges. One of them is the Greyland Park, the new changing rooms, where you can see some great design in that park and other improvements as well to pedestrian safety and greenways. Another project was in Birkenhead in the Leroy's Bush Little Shoal Bay area, the track upgrades, which are being renewed, and this is obviously helping to mitigate against Kauri dieback. This is highly recommended by my mum. And I'm going to ask Craig McElroy just to come and talk about the next project, which is pretty amazing out in Takanini.
Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd just like to update you on the Awakiri wetland project. This is the whole ability to service the new growth area in Papakura, and it's really exciting to be able to create a new natural environment out of what previously was greenfield area. And I think anyone who's been out there, you couldn't believe that this asset is so new because it looks so natural already. And it's been a big investment program for council, so we've spent on this program to date $101 million. Now, not all of that is the wetland, but I want to remind council that the Grove Road box culvert and the artillery tunnel provide the connectivity from this wetland to the harbour, and so you need to look at it as an integrated whole. Then we've got the other two stages which are going to be happening from 2024 to 2028, and that's another $49 million to come. So that by the time we finish this project, we'll have invested $150 million in a stormwater outcome. I think the point there to take home, the take-home message really, is that some of these new areas that we're developing for greenfield are very expensive. So that's $150 million just for this one area that we've had to develop. I think it's really important going forward that our new greenfield development reflects the true cost of infrastructure. I think that's the take-home lesson for council out of this project, but I think bearing in mind where we've come from, it's been a really great technical outcome. And just moving on to our St Mary's Bay project. This is another project that we're very proud of. The shot that you've got up there shows the marine pipeline actually sitting in the water outside of the West Haven. I'm pleased to report that this is a little bit more up to date, that pipeline has now been installed and is virtually complete. The new diffuser's in place and 80% of the backfill is in place, and the whole project is due for early completion in June 2021, 2 months ahead of schedule, which I think when you take COVID into account, that's an exceptional performance, and I think a lot of the credit has to go to our contractor, McConnell Dowell, who have been an absolute delight to work with in this project. So just put in a plug for McConnell Dowell because they really deserve it. They've done a fantastic job. And I think it also shows the benefit of really close collaboration between the contracting parties and the Healthy Waters team to achieve the outcome. All in all, the project is coming in on budget, and when you take into account the consenting and everything else, this project is $45 million, but I think it's an excellent investment in terms of the water quality outcome that it's going to derive. This is a key part, as you'll recall, of the Western Isthmus Water Quality Improvement Program, and so it's great to get one major milestone ticked off for that initiative. Happy to deal with any questions.
Right, thank you. Finance, anything more from you?
Yep, we haven't
So
quite-
why don't we just get to the end and then we'll go back and ask questions to everybody, if that's all right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of operating performance, Ross has already foreshadowed our performance is favourable overall to budget, and probably the biggest change definitely compared to what we expected in the emergency budget is that consenting volumes have not dropped, and in fact they have increased on pre-COVID levels. Also high numbers of building inspections, as you would expect alongside that. The volumes are providing challenges to us. It is hard to get enough staff, and obviously it wasn't quite planned to go this way either. And it is quite a nationwide challenge where a lot of the consultants we outsource work to are also at capacity. So we are starting to see some reductions in timeliness, and you'll see that come through in the non-financial performance measures as well. Other areas related into the property and construction sector are also ahead of budget, for example, LIMS and property files. And I'll hand over to Karuna, who will briefly touch on the non-financial performance measures.
Kia ora. Yeah, I'll run through the performance measures and then onto the highlights. Firstly, as you'll see up there, 28 measures were updated in Q2, with 12 being met and 16 not being met. COVID-19 has continued to impact usage of our libraries, art facilities, community centres and hire venues. Compared to the same quarter last year, library visits are down 24%, active recreation 19% and community venues are down 25%. We continue to do well in food and hygiene licensing and stormwater management. With consenting, as Nicola mentioned, with high volumes, but performance has been reasonably stable for Q2 and improved from last year for both building consents and resource consents. Customer satisfaction remains steady. Anecdotal customer feedback includes compliments about our speed and communication, with some suggestions coming through for additional online help with digital lodgements. Moving on to the highlights, our customers continue to embrace digital usage. It is driven from increases in online registrations and consent applications. 40% of our problems are now being reported through the online reported problems service, so that's been really successful. Amute was established in 2018 by the Southern Initiative, and it was launched as a social procurement and supplier diversity initiative to help promote the growth of Māori and Pasifika businesses. It enables fair participation in the tendering process, and then their skill, experience and expertise wins them work in industries such as infrastructure and construction. So there are plans to expand nationwide, and Council was the first New Zealand organisation to implement supplier diversity with Māori and Pasifika business and social enterprise. So we've got less plastics going to landfill. And the Carry Dieback program continues. And last but not least, we've won 3 awards for Embury Regional Park, which won the Silver Award. Our annual report won the Public Sector category at the CPA Australia New Zealand Integrated Reporting Awards, and our Te Manawa Community Hub at Westgate won the 5-star Green Star Design rating. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it? Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Now I've got a number of questions, and I'll start with Councillor Walker.
Awatiri project, which I haven't seen, but strikes me as very commendable. I would expect that that particular project will be making a significant reduction to reducing emissions. Well, it'll be locking up carbon. Is that something that we actually pick up through projects like that so that we can report on that?
So what we are doing in Healthy Waters is, and we're working in concert with Ports of Auckland, Watercare and Auckland Transport, is developing a carbon model that looks at whole of life carbon accounting. The problem at the moment is people are only looking at carbon from a construction viewpoint, and you don't get a true view of what carbon reduction looks like until you look at the whole of life of the asset operation. That's now been built into all of our business cases going forward, but this project predated that work, if you like, because the science has only recently caught up out of the UK that enables us to adopt this approach. It's going to be quite leading edge in terms of, I'm not aware of anyone in New Zealand at the moment that's doing whole of life carbon accounting. It's been done strategically to suit arguments, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the true situation.
And the other question I've got, and I'm sure it's in the detail somewhere, is just around the impact of fare box recovery as it's affecting our revenue.
Sorry, Councillor Walker, I didn't quite catch that.
It's not a question for you. I mean, you're welcome to go there, but I'm assuming that it'd be a hard thing to answer.
Yeah. Parole, Ross, do you? Yeah.
I just briefly. So we had an underwrite of PD fares all the way through the 6-month period. So in these results, that has the benefit of that underwrite fully included.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And first one for Craig. The Awatere Stormwater Project, given the cost of these, we know low impact design for stormwater is more expensive, but it has better outcomes. Have you got a view about how we'll actually be able to, well, we won't be doing these things. If we get our stormwater taken off us in a big new entity, do you think that a government controlled entity like that is going to be locally responsive to really important issues like this in terms of, or do you think they might just revert to the big old pipe culvert stuff to keep costs down? It's a bit of a worry.
I think the good news is the world has moved on from the concept of building pipes. Building pipes would be the last thing we'd want to do at the moment. All I can say is that as long as I'm in the tent influencing the outcome, I can assure you community will always come first. And so to me, this is all about, if this is going to happen, we have to take a leadership position, not a passive position, because I don't think anyone in New Zealand does stormwater better than Healthy Waters does. I'm quite proud of that, and we have to lead the way with thinking. And to that extent, I want to control the narrative around industry documents. Like, we want to set up a set of national performance standards that get adopted nationally that we can use as a blueprint going forward for any, if there is going to be a new business model, we need to make sure that it's starting off with the best possible chance in life.
Thank you. I think.
And my other question just around...
On this?
It's on the slides. It's in it, yes. It's about the consenting volumes and the staff challenges. So given that house sales are not slowing down anytime soon, and we've had problems with getting out limbs and information to people, and we've got problems with resources, if we've got a plan to be able to meet that, be able to get these staff so we can meet our statutory timeframes.
Through the chair, I can't speak in a lot of detail to answer your question, Councillor, but there is a lot of recruitment activity going on at the moment. And
we've got the budget for that?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Good morning. You dropped me in it a wee bit. I was teasing Councillor Hills about the cost of the Little Shoal Bay tracks at a cost of $600,000, and then seconds later you announced the $150 million that you were spending on Awatere. So I'm feeling a little bit sheepish, but I do say that it is an exemplar project, and it has to be designed to the standard that it's been developed, of course, as Craig knows, because of the concentration of peat. So just sticking pipes in the ground in that location wouldn't be a good engineering solution. be that as it may, it is outstanding. What I want to know, Craig, is that as we move into the recovery phase and we require front-end loading of these stormwater infrastructure projects, what is the capacity of Healthy Waters to accelerate in terms of officers' ability and project managers' ability to contract for the capex required for these big stormwater projects, because we will be under pressure to respond to the market, as Councillor Cooper has alluded to. There's a lot of growth coming, but you took a fair whack during the emergency budget negotiations, and we're going to have to put that back in there. So what can you do, and how much time is it going to take you to accelerate?
So we're back in full recovery mode at the moment, and we're already planning for a much larger investment program going forward. And so we've got proposals going up through the Strategic Procurement Committee in May, looking at what an enhanced delivery model might look like for Healthy Waters, because I think early engagement with contractors and designers is going to be critical in delivering our outcome. And if there is going to be a water reform process, with or without different parties involved in it, the need to secure those resources now and give them that guaranteed workload going forward puts us in the best possible position to take advantage of the market. Right now, the market is ironically looking for work at the moment, but that situation is going to change very quickly as we move into the next stage, particularly as some of the new regulations around water kick in, because water is about to become one of the most highly regulated things in New Zealand, with the new regulator that's been set up initially for drinking water, but the next line of sight is wastewater and stormwater. So the world for water is about to radically change from a regulatory perspective.
Would Auckland Council, would we be like the biggest potential customer for people working in this industry in the country, given the scale of the work that we have and the demand that exists here?
We certainly are, and I think there's also, so there's not only what's happening within the Auckland region, but there's also how we will influence what happens nationally as well. Because I think a lot of our IP is quite capable of being shared across the country. So I think there's two opportunities. One is Auckland-centric and the other is New Zealand-centric. And we're working with WaterQ at the moment, looking at what those opportunities look like. Because regardless of whether or not we are part of that reform process, we still have a massive opportunity to take on a national leadership role. And I think that's where the staff want to be as well. And so I think it helps then attract the right staff that want to join the organisation, because that paints a very different picture to where we currently sit.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going back to you, Councillor Cooper. We'll look at staff numbers, etc., as part of the governing body on the 25th of March. That's when we'll have that feedback. Councillor Casey.
I might suck back my question then about staff numbers, but I won't suck back the one on Ports of Auckland and the deficit of 20 workers. Can you tell me where that deficit was within the organisation?
Parole's just coming. Pramod, sorry.
Through the chair, the reduction in FTEs was as a result of a restructure, and the staff impacted were back office staff.
Back office staff. Okay. My second question is still on the Ports of Auckland, so you might just have to stay there. Can you just, in the narrative around one of the tables, it says here container volumes were down due to capacity constraints. Can you just tell me what that means? Is that staffing capacity or is it something else?
Through the chair, my understanding is a combination of staff and just the volume, congestion issues at the ports as well.
Sorry?
A combination of staffing and congestion issues at the ports.
Congestion issues meaning? Sorry, I'm just trying to say, there is a big dip in their productivity, and I'm interested in how it's described, and I don't understand the narrative, that's all. So I'm just getting it very clear about what is wrong.
The commentary is a comparison of the volumes through the ports at the same period in the prior year compared to what happened this year, and the volumes were lower due to the impacts of COVID and and the number of the volume through the ports were lower due to the impacts of COVID.
I'm sorry.
Hold on, councillor. With respect, these are finance people, and
I didn't hear what you. I just didn't hear the last bit that you said. COVID.
Sorry, councillor. So the impacts through the ports have been well reported in prior updates as well. So the congestion issues have been well known, and those are the reasons why the volumes were lower compared to the same period last year.
If we're blunt, we'd simply say instead of operating the 8 cranes they had, they've been operating 3. So this month, next month, they'll be operating 4, and that'll go up to 6 by July. But that's the reason for the drop in productivity. If you're not operating the cranes, you're not carrying the containers.
My last question on the ports. In the table under group capital performance, can you just explain that line to me for Ports of Auckland? It looks like does it mean that they just stopped their automation project entirely, or
can you
did
read the
some
line,
things?
councillor, please? Can you read the line?
Group capital performance. No, there's no. I'm sorry, there's no numbers on the slides. It's a budget line for ports. It's group capital performance, and it reads 117.20 bracket variance of 10.74 total. Just trying to make sense of it, and what the line means. What does it? What does it mean?
That line, it's a comparison of the actual capital investment to date compared with the budget phasing to date.
Right, so what does it mean though that they didn't do?
Sorry, councillor, I don't have the detail on exactly which projects have been underspent to date. It is a timing issue, as I understand it. The same with any other budget, actual versus budget on that table. It's a comparison of the financial spend to date compared to the budget.
Thank you. Can I just say one thing? Can I have a comment as well? Not about the ports. It's a tiny comment.
All right.
Just there's a line in there about 95% of our assets are graffiti free, and we haven't actually mentioned graffiti free Auckland for a long time. I think we're doing a magnificent job. There's no reason for I just want to say that. I think it's just fantastic. If you visit any other city in New Zealand at the moment with lockdown and kids at home, there's a lot of graffiti. It's a joy. Thank you.
Thanks for ending on a positive. That's really nice. Councillor Hills.
Thank you. I'm not sure who the question is for, but my question is more around so that there's going to be some positive news out of this potentially. If anyone's looking, it's already looking positive, but I guess that strikes a concern for me that maybe we're not doing enough, or we're going to try and get that last 15 million in savings from squeezing some lemons that we might not need to. This is a highlight package of the good stuff and the changes we've seen, but could you maybe tell me how I explain to the public or staff who are asking why we would need to continue to acting the way we have been acting to make savings and maybe reduce projects if we're seeing better results? So it's not, for me, I want to see that go up to 290 so we can do more capital. You know, I am hearing some positive noises from Craig and others, but I just want to know what is my kind of comms angle on we're doing better than we did.
Sure, happy to respond to that. So I guess this is showing that, the highlights of that 6-month period, which were pretty favourable. I guess looking ahead, it's covered in the reports, hasn't really come through on the slides. There are still risks out there. So one of the things on the negative side of the ledger is the timing of asset sales. So we set a big target, 240 million of asset sales cash to be realised this year. So we're still confident that that's an achievable target over time, but it's going to be delayed. So there's a big, in the asset sales picture going forward, there's going to be an impact there. The other big risk is COVID and lockdowns. So, we're not out of the woods yet. We've all experienced what can happen with lockdowns. The situation can change quickly. So, what that means for the next 6 months, is hard to tell. So we think it's prudent that we take a cautious approach. I guess the other thing to mention is that what we're looking at is some good performance, or performance compared to budget. So things aren't as bad as we thought they would be over this 12-month financial year. we've seen in particular the property market and regulatory volume has been a lot stronger than we thought. Everyone kind of thought, property prices would fall 10%. They haven't. They've gone up 10%. We thought developers would slow down. They haven't. They've been going full steam ahead. So that's the current year. We're also in the middle of consulting on our 10-year budget. The outlook further out hasn't really changed all that much either. We'll be reporting to this through workshops starting from next month about that longer term picture. So it's a question of, yes, we've had a really good 6 months and some things have come in better, but there's still lots of risks. And some of the things that impact the council, such as the ports dividends, airports, parts of the council group, Auckland Unlimited, where they're exposed to concerts, with international visitors. So a lot of those things haven't changed. We've still been hit by COVID, but just not as bad as we thought, particularly in that 6-month period.
Thank you. And I have two quick follow-up questions. One on the how do we describe a surplus? So it's been explained really well here before, but I can't exactly remember. So people see the headline, council has a surplus, but it's not magical money, we're just not spending. Can you just describe how we talk about that's not just 190 million sitting that we chose not to spend?
Yeah, so I guess it all comes down to cash. It means we've got a bit more cash in the door than we thought, a bit less cash going out. Any sort of surplus cash that we create from operating, that goes into funding the capital program and reduces the amount of debt we need to borrow. So it all kind of washes out into cash and debt. And so the outcome of this strong operating performance, as John has indicated, is a better debt position. We'll have a bit less debt and a bit less, and our debt to revenue ratio will look a bit better. So end of this financial year, it's looking like debt will be a better number. It'll be lower than we thought. So that's kind of where it washes out. It's cash and debt. That's the bottom line for us.
My last question, probably, Madam Chair, you focused that we'll be talking about job numbers in a later date as well. But I guess it looks from the figures that our council, Auckland Council proper, has been, doing the heavy lifting on reducing those jobs when, say, in water care and Auckland Transport have lifted their numbers. So I guess we don't have direct control over that. But the CCO review says we should be working along, much closer lines. Is there any concerns over those increases for them, or were they unavoidable because of capital works and extra parts of the business AT and water care have done?
Yeah, I think in terms of diving into the detail, the CCO oversight committee is a place to get into that. At a sort of a high level, that the roles there are frontline services. Some of them are related to revenue generating activity, so it's not increasing back office staff. It's stuff that's frontline delivering services, bringing money in. So from that perspective, it's not a significant concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thanks. So what does that, that on the face of it, that better news, like the consent volumes in regulatory being higher, higher expected revenue. What does that then do to the to that other figure that's got bandied around a bit, the $450 million hole? So when I go there and look and see, $54 million lower regulatory revenue, does that materially impact on those sort of figures that go to those kind of headline sort of $450 billion holes?
Yep, so the emergency budget had a $450 million expected reduction in revenue for this financial year. The fact that regulatory revenue, IGC revenue, is held up means that when we get to the end of the financial year, it's probably going to be a smaller number than the 450. The 450 isn't going to go away. We're not going to find hundreds of millions of extra revenue, but it is looking like it'll be a better picture overall. We'll have a bit more revenue by the get to the end of the year. That's offset by other things such as the asset sales timing, but overall we think it'll end up with lower debt by the end of the financial year.
And just on something, and I just would appreciate a little explanation here, in terms of things like the regulatory. Now it mentions revenue and then higher corresponding costs in the same breath. So does it follow if there's not just regulatory but other parts of council's operations that have been identified, is there then savings if there's not the demand there? So for instance, if there's lesser coming through the regulatory, I assume the costs are lower. And is that reflected in the figures then that contribute again to that 450 million and $1 billion? Do we allow for that in those figures?
In terms of the areas where there's higher demand, yes. So in the LIMS area, for example, we've had to bring on temporary contract workers to deal with the volumes in that area. So if we did not have the volumes, we would not have the extra staff costs. Regulatory also has substantially higher costs to manage to process all of those volumes.
So yes, in general, a lot of the revenue, the extra revenue has some extra cost associated with it. But overall, in that 6-month period, we've seen better than budgeted revenue and better than budgeted expenditure overall.
Okay, Councillor. With no further questions, I'd like to thank the staff for the preparation of their report. It's very detailed. Thank you very much. Ask you to step back. I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Angela, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Dalton. And then we'll move into comments. First comment we have, so thank you, staff. Very good. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, and as they disappear, I do want to thank the staff for this. There's two comments I want to make. First of all, when you see, look, we've got better revenue than we expected, there's a huge temptation, and I share it with Councillor Hills, that, wow, here's some money we could spend. Or alternatively, other councillors might think, here's some money that therefore we don't need to raise as much revenue. But the fragility of the situation at the moment is still intense, and the freeboard that we've got is vital to keep. If we take it right up to the line and then we face another lockdown, which is not beyond imagination, or post-COVID, we find that the flush that we got from the wage subsidy disappears and suddenly the housing market drops off because of closed borders, we've got to be in a position to be able to cope with those unexpected changes. So the temptation to raise less or to spend more just needs to be restrained until we're in a more certain environment and we understand the risks fully. As it is, we know that we're going to be challenged on the sale of surplus properties, and we also know that from this report that we've hit 285% debt to revenue ratio. A year ago, we were saying 265. That's as far as we can go. So while we should celebrate that the figures are better than what they might have been, we should be cautious about not utilising that money. And I've heard a number of councillors around the table say, let's err on the side of caution. If we pay down a little bit of debt in the short term, if things turn bad again, we have that more freeboard to deal with. The second thing I want to do is talk about Awakeri, and I've been there with Angela Dalton and Daniel Newman and Bill Cashmore. And councillors, if you haven't been there, it is phenomenally good. It is really good. If you want to look at something that you can be really proud of, that we've done as a council, that's a classic example. I mean, we've enabled 13,000 extra houses. We've put in anti-flooding mechanisms, but we've also created open space, green space, in the best possible way, recapturing the heritage of the old kauri swamp. The houses around it are really intensive. And if you didn't have something like that, you'd say, oh God, what are they going to do? But the walkways around it are just fantastic. And I'd put it on a par with what we've done, Councillor Casey in Oawanga in Oakley Creek. Where we've turned, those closed drain concepts into something that is a magnificent celebration of our city, and you get a sense of it from the pictures. But if you've got an hour or so, take a trip down there, have a look, take a walk along the walkways, and you can really see some fantastic work that Healthy Waters has been doing, which is also what makes me reluctant to pass across Healthy Waters to a body that's not directly responsible to council. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. I too think that we need to hold fast and stick to our plan because we don't know what's ahead. We've already had 2 lockdowns since those results have come in, and agree that paying down the debt is the priority so we get some headroom. Look, I just wanted to congratulate Craig as well. What an amazing project it is out at Awakiri. And coming back to something you always say is, how do we tell our good stories? How do we get that out and get the people of all over Auckland going to have a visit? Because it is so worthwhile. It is absolutely beautiful in the middle of Papakura down there. And I just wanted to, one of the highlights talks about the success of Amatai. And they fly under the radar, you know. They're doing such great work, $45 million worth of contracts for Māori and Pacifica businesses, 300 jobs in South Auckland, and it will be more than that. They're changing lives, and they're doing it without any fuss. They're just getting on with the mahi because they know what to do. And so I hope that we continue to support them because that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of making sure our people are employed and our businesses are staying afloat. So otherwise, thanks to the finance team. It's a great report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, I echo the comments in relation to Awakiri. If anybody wants to come door knocking with me, I'm more than happy to lead a delegation as we knock on doors in the area and talk to the residents, and you can check out the project. It is magnificent. Chair, I think that one of the things about our advocacy to DIA on the Three Waters Review is the contribution that the council is making to decarbonisation of the urban environment through 21st century stormwater design, which is absolutely in keeping with the what the Climate Change Commission's report set out as a requirement to respond to the climate emergency. Whole of life contribution to reducing carbon is a consideration, and it would be good to start to really quantify some of those big healthy water stormwater projects in terms of contribution to decarbonisation, because I have no doubt that we will do better in Auckland than almost anywhere else in the country as a contribution towards achieving that, because of the IP that Craig and the team have developed and because of the scale of the work that they undertake. So I think that it's a very relevant point to take up, and I would ask that beyond a financial consideration of the group's performance, that there needs to be some reflection on our advocacy to central government as part of that Three Waters Review around what we can do for decarbonisation in terms of a stormwater response, because they won't, outside of Auckland, they won't do it as well as us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody because everyone's tried so hard. We've put huge expectations and requirements on our staff, and they've done an amazing job. I also just want to, of course, thank the regulatory staff, especially in the consenting, our inspectors, because, you know, the construction, we thought it was all going to go to hell in the handbasket, and it hasn't. We thought nobody would buy houses. It's gone crazy, and we did cut some staff, and we're working on getting more again. But I think that's been exceptional that the customer satisfaction has stayed at the same level. So I just want to thank everybody for the work they've done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably just echoing what Councillor Cooper says. I think we thought 6 months ago that things would be very, very messy, and they have been, and it's been extremely difficult for many of our staff and our communities and departments try and hold everything together. But I think in spite of that, there's been a huge amount done. We've kept our libraries open. We've kept our maintenance pretty, top shape in most of our communities that you can see. And, as a liaison for Auckland Unlimited, the amount of different things they've been able to do, working with business, getting funding from government to help local businesses, thousands of them, and really changing up what they were normally doing. I think the zoo, Councillor Watson, in January was 30,000 visitors above what they expected. You know, things like that, which is bringing revenue that helps the overall picture. So it's pretty phenomenal. But I think my concern is that we ensure we are flexible enough to ramp up some of that work and not let costs escalate. If we improve the situation again in 6 months, I don't want to see that we've not taken advantage of doing some of that work while interest rates are low, while our community's crying out for those renewals and things. So just want to make sure that we are not just celebrating the wins, but we're actually trying to be flexible to change up what we need to do. Because I know there's been so much pressure on staff, and there are departments that do need a couple extras and things over time, and I'm sure that's always being looked at. But yeah, congratulations to everyone to get to those levels after 6 months of during a pandemic is pretty phenomenal. So thank you, and thanks to you too, Madam Chair.
So thank you, and thank you everybody. I'm not going to repeat what everyone said, but we're only halfway there. We're only halfway there, and these figures, of course, are only to the 31st of December. And there is a big lever that we know already that we're not going to achieve, and that's one of the asset recycling, nearly $250 million, all right? We're not going to get there. We know that now. So I think celebrate the success, but be very wary and cautious as we go through. Peter, to you and your team, thank you. They've done an outstanding job. It's a really tough year, and I think they're actually exemplary people, so please pass on our combined congratulations. Right, people, we have a mover and a seconder receiving the 6-month report. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So that was 6 months. What do we look like now? Moving now into our emergency budget update, and bring back Pramod, and Nicola. Thank you.
Kia ora, good morning everybody. Through you, Madam Chair, Nicola and I will be presenting the emergency budget update. So this is an update to the end of February 2021. Slide shown above now the recommendations for the report, and they reflect the key updates for this month. Firstly, we've got the usual financial dashboard, which provides an indication of how we're tracking against the emergency budget year to date. Nicola will provide an update on how we're progressing against our 120 million savings target, and finally noting an investment increase at Watercare, who their board have approved an additional 22 million of investment for the current financial year. So moving to the financial performance to date, a lot of the messages will echo the messages provided in the quarterly update. Just a reminder that this is a financial update on how we're progressing against budget for the period to the end of February. So whether indicators show favourable or below budget or unfavourable, it's a purely financial indicator, not about operational or service performance. In terms of our revenue to date, things are tracking well. As you've already heard, the similar trends at the half year has continued up till the end of February, with both regulatory revenue and Watercare revenue, predominantly IGC revenue, tracking well ahead of budget and expectations. In terms of our capital expenditure, that is still tracking below budget. For most areas of council, some of that is driven due to timing more than anything else, but at the end of this quarter we will have a better indication of year-end forecasts, and we'll be able to provide a better estimate of where we'll be at year-end. Operationally, in terms of OPEX as well, we're tracking favourably to budget, and the key variances there relate to Auckland Transport, for example, who had to spend a lot less on cleaning to date, and this was budgeted for anticipation for any COVID-related cleaning that would be required on top of their normal activities. In terms of risks and issues, the asset recycling remains the key major risk. Again, this is a timing issue of when the cash benefits will be realised. There isn't any action required to address that at this stage. Our debt projections and timing of when that cash will be realised means that no action is required at this stage, but we continue to monitor progress overall. We did have 3 days of lockdown if you include the 28th of February. There was no material impact on the finances to the end of February. The year-to-date performance that has been favourable has covered any impact of that. But we also had 1 week of lockdown at the first week of March. The results for March are not available at this stage, but we have worked with the CCOs and council departments to have an estimate of what that impact could be. If you account with the top up from Waka Kotahi continuing for public transport, that has minimised some of our impacts. The estimate for the week is around 3 million of revenue impact, and that's mainly down to parking and enforcement revenue, and the Lantern Festival was also planned for that week, and so that was an impact for Auckland Unlimited for that due to that lockdown. The other key update is in relation to Watercare's revenue and CapEx increase for this financial year. The Watercare Board have considered their financial position to date, mainly taking into account their debt to revenue position. With the higher revenue, their debt to revenue projections for the year is expected to be better than expected, but still remaining in line with their LTP projections and the indications that we've provided to them, the limits that they need to operate within. Taking that into consideration, the Watercare Board have approved an additional 22 million of CapEx for this financial year, taking their total budget up to 760 million. The projects that this funding would go towards are highlighted in the report itself, but the key reasons for approving the additional investment is to ensure that projects that are progressing aren't stopped or slowed down, which would have contractual implications. And also, some of the funding is required to plan for projects that are expected to be delivered in the next financial year. The other key thing to note is if there is any downturn in revenue for the remainder of this financial year, the IGC revenue is tracking that far ahead that any downturn is expected to be accommodated, and Watercare would remain within their debt limits. So just passing on to Nicola now to update you on the savings progress.
Thanks, Pramod. So for the month of February, we have banked another 2 million of savings, so we're now at 107 million in total, or 89% of the 120 million target. The main item that was successfully concluded in February related to some procurement negotiations on the maintenance contracts relating to previous lockdowns. So that was very pleasingly concluded negotiation. We are tracking well. We're continuing to look at the moment at areas where we're underspending to see where we can bank additional one-off savings this year. And we have a high level of confidence that we will achieve the target by the end of the year.
Thank you.
And over to, happy to take any questions.
So I'll start with questions. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you for your presentation. My question was around was it 1.2 million? Was it 1.7 million in the procurement savings during lockdown? Is that mostly towards our major suppliers, or are there some little ones in there that were impacted?
I don't have all the details, and I suspect some of the information is possibly confidential, but I understand it was to do with the original level 4 lockdowns where it's taken a long time. It happened obviously so suddenly, took a long time to work through the reduced level of maintenance that could be provided in that period and the impacts on the contracts. I think it was the larger contracts.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I loved your final statement, Nicola, on the confidence that we will meet our savings target. Right, so thank you very much, and thank you for the work you're doing and keeping us updated. I offer for comments, noting that, you know, the savings that we made last quarter sort of absorbed straight away with the lockdown in some respects. Councillor Hills.
Yeah, just want a brief comment again. I guess one is just, yeah, my concern around if that savings doesn't move over the next couple months, that we don't just try to arbitrarily, the word, yeah. To do that, if it's going to mean more staff reductions in a short term to meet a target. I know there are other savings we're making, we're trying hard to do that, but just if our revenue keeps improving, I would hate to do things that cost more in the long run. The other comment I do want to make is just because we've just finished, just want to congratulate everyone involved, a lot of our staff from Auckland Unlimited and that America's Cup and what has happened over the last few months. They had to do things on a quite a reduced revenue of what they expected. They didn't have the tourists. We had 50,000 people a day on Saturday and Sunday, and that was just from obviously Aucklanders, New Zealanders, managing that right across Auckland. And I think Viv Beck on the radio said that this week has been the biggest week for the city centre spending for over a year. So, it does show that our investment in our events, even without tourism, can have a big effect after quite a tough time. So I know those staff have worked their butts off, and sometimes, almost 20 hours a day when you're looking at how those events stretch, whether it's the safety, the fan zones, the coordinating everything, switching stuff when there's a no wind day or a lockdown. I think all those teams out there who knows what they're got next if there's no events coming up, have done an amazing job for our city while we've been sitting in here doing the decisions based on that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, just stimulated by Councillor Hills's comment. We should be celebrating today, not simply because we won the boat race. That was great. It was a really good feeling down there yesterday. As part of our fundraising for the council, I'm offering to sell videos of the chair of the finance committee dancing like a teenager. But no, not on a boat. She was on. Yeah.
Point of order. Move on, please.
Yeah. We'll move on from that. But two things that were really important. One, we came in on time and under budget for the capital works. So there were savings that were made there that were reallocated. And secondly, in the course of the emergency budget, we did cut some of the OPEX costs for event management, but nevertheless, we managed those events perfectly well. There's a myriad of things that could go wrong. I think as a city, we can take real pride in the fact that we hosted this really well. One piece of new information that I want to share directly with you, I got a call at the end of the boat race from the Minister in charge of America's Cup, Stuart Nash, and he said the government would like to see a parade. They understood our financial position, and if there were to be a parade, they would fund it 100%. Now, I've raised that with Emirates Team New Zealand. They're still, I think, of the mind that we've celebrated. We celebrated last night. We had our fireworks display, leftovers not used for the Lantern Festival, but the offer is there should Team New Zealand want it. I'm just taking into account that, when we brought the Cup back from Bermuda, 90,000 people walked down the road. They weren't 90,000 wealthy people. They were 90,000 people who were a cross-section of our community from all different ethnic groups, from different income levels. And I tell you what, some of the most patriotic people down there that I saw yesterday were New Zealanders. They were really into it. There is an outstanding question about what happens now with the Cup, the next offence. Our position, I think, is reasonably clear on it. We made a contribution of $112 million to create facilities. We did a good job with those facilities. They're ready to be used again. And, the reciprocity we're probably looking for from Team New Zealand is we've made that investment, not council, but Aucklanders. Auckland has made that investment, and we would like to use those facilities again. We are not in the business of bidding against Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Isle of Wight or anywhere else. We don't have money to throw at the problem, and I would not be in favour of throwing money at it. The government has announced that they will provide finance for the team to stay together for the next couple of years, and they'd do again what they did in terms of meeting the cost of the hosting fee. And I think my position on it, I hope it's in line with councillors, is to give real encouragement to Team New Zealand to stay here. Peter Burling clearly wants to. How did he win on Tuesday? He knew where the wind was coming from because he knew the Waitemata Harbour. He welcomed the huge amount of support from Aucklanders and New Zealanders. So we should push hard. In the end, it's Team New Zealand's decision. And I am conscious that in 2003, a country without a coastline, Switzerland, bought out our skipper, bought out our chief strategist, bought out our sail designer, bought out our ship design team, and we went into 2003 with an inexperienced crew. They've got some realities they've got to face up to, but I think that with the offer by government and our offer to continue to improve those facilities on the wharf, we've got a very good offer that I hope that Team New Zealand will take up. So I just want to share that with you this morning, and thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Fletcher. There's no money for a ticker tape parade out of this committee.
Congratulations, Your Worship. I am so heartened to hear what you've just told us, and I think your ongoing dialogue with government creates a really special opportunity. I had the privilege of being mayor in 2000 when Team New Zealand successfully defended the America's Cup. And very few things create that sense of total euphoria and excitement. I think yesterday we were all abuzz, but for many people, I know myself included, the viaduct was so full. The viaduct has been so successful. The viaduct would not exist without the America's Cup. There's been huge investment over decades into this. While I appreciate that Grant Dalton and co will make the final decision on this, there is a sense of ownership by all Kiwis, particularly Aucklanders. And I really passionately feel that we should enable something modest. It doesn't need to be grand, but it's more about the occasion of people coming together and celebrating that moment. I probably wanted to be down at the viaduct yesterday with my grandchildren, but that area had closed off. You know, I mean, in terms of health and safety, there are a whole range of people who, for whatever reason, couldn't get there to feel that moment. I think we owe it to them. And I know that Team New Zealand can be quite strong-minded about things, but I think on this occasion, and I rely on your good judgment here, sir, but I think it's an event we should have. And as you know, I am not one to want to see anything from the city going into funding things that are unnecessary, but this is very special, and this touches the heart of so many, and it's our opportunity to enable a thank you to everyone for what they've shared. So I hope you can pull it off.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't want this financial item, which is the emergency update, to actually morph into what we do about the America's Cup. So if you've got a comment about the emergency budget, please feel free. Councillor Dalton? Sorry, Councillor Darby.
Look, thanks. Look, massive success. I do think we need to get a post-event analysis from Auckland Unlimited. There was a business case for our investment. We need to go and check on that business case now. One of the elements I would like checking is that, I mean, there's no doubt that Aucklanders and New Zealanders, I think New Zealanders, other than Aucklanders, were watching that cup. But I'm really interested to see how did we meet those targets in international reach? I really am a bit suspicious about those 100 million worldwide viewer numbers. A friend of mine in the US, I assumed they were watching it, mad keen Volvo watches, America's Cup watches. The response was, are you kidding? $174 for streaming? I'm out of here. My brother-in-law in Germany, mad keen America's Cup watcher, he says, no one's covering it here. There's nothing in the media. And he said, I can watch it. I watch it on YouTube after the races happened, which is free. So I think this international reach, that part of the business case, I'd be really interested in finding out whether that was sold to us accurately.
I spoke to Nick last night, that report is coming, so no worries about that. And if we're talking about personal circumstances, yeah, a friend of mine in Switzerland did watch it, so, I mean, yeah. Hey, listen, I just want to come back to where we are, the emergency budget update. I just want to, again, Peter, thank your staff for what they've done getting us to this point. I'm always nervous about my weight loss analogy on the savings, but it's getting tighter as we get to the end. But I was really, Nicola, thank you for your confidence around getting there. So I'd like to move the emergency update for March. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Worship. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. People, item 11 is being postponed. There's more information required around the ARAFA funding, so we're leaving that this month, and we need to move that, so I will move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Walker, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 12 is a summary of our information memoranda, briefings, etc. I will move those. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mulholland, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. No extraordinary business, so I will close the meeting at 12:01 and welcome you to come downstairs for a bite to eat. Thank you.